Hey there, friends. Get ready for a wild story that starts on a super sunny morning in my little neighborhood. My name's Sam, and I'm just a regular kid, not too tall, not too short, just me. I love animals more than anything, and my favorite ones are my pet ducks. Their names are Waddles and Quackster, and trust me, they're the coolest ducks you'll ever hear about. They're my best buddies, and I take care of them every single day. Waddles is the funny one. He's got these big, goofy feet that flop around when he walks, and he always looks like he's smiling. Quackster is the bossy one. She's smaller, but she quacks super loud to let everyone know she's in charge. They live in a little pen in my backyard, a cozy spot I built just for them. It's got soft straw, a tiny water puddle for splashing, and a little roof to keep the rain off. Every morning, I'd run out there with a big grin because Waddles and Quackster would leave me presents perfect little duck eggs. Those eggs were awesome. They were small, smooth, and white, like treasures hiding in the straw. I'd pick them up super careful, holding them in my hands like they were made of glass. Sometimes I'd count them 1, 2, maybe 3 if I was lucky. I'd smile so big my cheeks hurt because it felt like I'd won a prize. I'd carry them inside to show my mom, and we'd cook them up for breakfast. They tasted so good, way better than boring old chicken eggs. My ducks made me happy every day, and I thought everyone in the neighborhood liked them too. But I was wrong. Not everyone thought my ducks were cool. There was this lady who lived 2 houses down from me, and she was trouble. Let's call her Karen, because that's what she acted like, a big, bossy Karen. She wasn't just any neighbor. Oh no, she was part of the HOA. That's a group of grown ups who make rules for the neighborhood, like what color your house can be or how short your grass has to stay. It's supposed to keep things nice, but Karen used it to boss everyone around like she was the queen of the street. Karen was tall and skinny, with hair that stuck up like she'd brushed it with a balloon. Her face always looked pinched, like she'd just smelled something stinky, like my ducks, maybe. She wore these big glasses that made her eyes look huge, and she'd walk around with a clipboard, writing stuff down and frowning at people. Every time she passed my house, she'd stop and stare at Waddles and Quackster. Her nose would scrunch up, and her lips would get all tight, like she was mad at them for just being there. I'd wave at her sometimes, trying to be nice, but she'd just huff and stomp away. I didn't get why she didn't like my ducks. They weren't hurting anybody. At first, I didn't think much about it. I mean, some people are just grumpy, right? My mom always says, "Sam, don't worry about grumpy folks, they're just mad at the world." So I let it go. I'd feed my ducks, play with them, and collect their eggs like always. Waddles would waddle over and peck at my shoes, and Quackster would quack like she was telling me a story. They made me laugh, and that's all I cared about. Karen could glare all she wanted, I had my ducks, and they were the best. But then something weird happened. It was a day just like any other. The sun was shining, the birds were chirping, and I bounced out of bed ready to see my ducks. I pulled on my sneakers, grabbed my little egg basket, and ran outside. The air smelled like flowers and grass, and I could hear Waddles and Quackster quacking hello from their pen. I skipped over, humming a little song, excited to find those perfect eggs waiting for me. But when I got there, I stopped dead in my tracks. The nest was empty. Not one egg. Not even a cracked one or a little piece of shell. Just straw and nothing else. I blinked hard, thinking maybe I was still sleepy and seeing things wrong. I bent down and patted the straw with my hands, looking everywhere. Nope, nothing. My heart started beating fast. Where were the eggs? Waddles waddled up and tilted his head at me, like he was confused too. Quackster quacked loud, flapping her wings, but she didn't have any answers either. I stood up and scratched my head. Did you guys forget to lay eggs today? I asked them, even though I knew ducks don't just forget. They'd been laying eggs every day for weeks, 2 or 3 little treasures, right on time. Something wasn't right. I looked around the pen, thinking maybe a squirrel or a bird swooped in and took them. But the pen was closed tight, and there were no holes or sneaky paw prints. It didn't make sense. Then I saw something that made my stomach twist. Right outside the pen, in the soft dirt by the fence, were footprints. Not duck feet or animal tracks, but big, muddy shoe prints. They weren't mine, my sneakers were clean, and these prints were way bigger. They led away from the pen, straight down the path, toward Karen's house. My eyes got wide. No way. Did she? Nah, she wouldn't. Would she? I tiptoed closer to the footprints, following them like a detective in one of those mystery books I read. They went past my yard, past the big oak tree, and right up to the sidewalk by Karen's place. I peeked around her hedge, holding my breath. Her curtains were open, and there she was, standing in her kitchen. My jaw dropped. In her hands were my duck eggs, my eggs. She was cracking them into a bowl, humming like she didn't have a care in the world. I couldn't believe it. Karen stole my duck eggs. My face got hot, and my hands turned into fists. Those were my treasures, from my ducks, and she just took them like they belonged to her. I wanted to bang on her door and yell, "Give me back my eggs, you egg thief." But I didn't. I just stood there, staring, my brain spinning with ideas. Karen thought she could boss everyone around, even my ducks. She thought I was just a kid who wouldn't do anything about it. Well, she was wrong. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. That's when I got a sneaky plan. If Karen wanted to play the egg-stealing game, I'd play too, but smarter. I turned around and ran back home, my mind buzzing. I didn't know exactly what I'd do yet, but I knew one thing for sure: Karen was about to learn that messing with me and my ducks was a big mistake. A really big one. Okay, friends, let's dive into the next part of my story. This is where things get tricky and a little bit wild. It all started one morning when I went out to check on my ducks, Waddles and Quackster. The sun was up, the sky was blue, and I was ready to see my little buddies and grab their eggs like I did every day. I had my little basket in my hand, swinging it back and forth, humming a silly tune. I couldn't wait to see how many eggs I'd find, maybe 2, maybe 3. It was always a fun surprise. I skipped over to their pen in the backyard. It's a small spot I made just for them, with straw on the ground and a tiny puddle for splashing. Waddles and Quackster were already waddling around, quacking hello. "Hey, guys," I said, grinning big. "Let's see what you've got for me today." I bent down to check their nest. It's this cozy pile of straw where they lay their eggs every morning. I reached in, excited to feel those smooth little treasures. But then I stopped. Something was wrong. Really wrong. The nest was empty. Totally empty. No eggs. Not one single egg was there. I blinked hard, thinking maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. I patted the straw with my hands, moving it around to make sure I wasn't missing anything. Nope, nothing. No smooth white eggs, no cracked shells, not even a tiny piece. Just straw and more straw. My tummy felt funny, like when you miss a step going down the stairs. Where were my eggs? I stood up and scratched my head. "Waddles, Quackster, what's going on?" I asked them. Waddles tilted his head and waddled over, pecking at my shoe like he always does. Quackster flapped her wings and quacked real loud, but she didn't have any eggs either. I squinted at them, wondering if maybe they were playing a duck prank on me. "Did you hide them somewhere?" I said, half laughing. But deep down, I knew ducks don't hide eggs. They lay them right there in the nest, every day, like clockwork. I looked around the pen, thinking maybe something else happened. Maybe a sneaky squirrel climbed in and took them. Or maybe a bird swooped down and snatched them up. I checked the fence. It was closed tight, no holes anywhere. I looked at the ground for animal tracks, like little paw prints or claw marks. Nothing. The pen was fine, my ducks were fine, but the eggs were gone. My heart started beating faster. This wasn't a squirrel or a bird. This was something else. Then I saw it. Oh boy, did I see it. Right outside the pen, in the soft dirt by the fence, were footprints. Not duck feet, those are webbed and funny looking. Not animal tracks either. These were big, muddy shoe prints, like the ones grown ups leave when they walk through wet grass. I stared at them, my eyes getting wide. These weren't my footprints, my sneakers were clean, and these were way bigger anyway. Someone had been here. Someone took my eggs. I followed the prints with my eyes, and guess where they went? Straight down the path, past my yard, past the big oak tree, and right toward Karen's house. My heart sank down to my toes. Karen. That sneaky HOA lady who glared at my ducks all the time. She lived 2 houses down, and she thought she was the boss of everything. Could she really? No way. But the footprints didn't lie. They went right to her place. My legs started moving before my brain caught up. I marched down the path, following those muddy prints like a detective on a mission. My hands were in fists, and my face felt hot. Those were my eggs, from my ducks, and if Karen took them, I was gonna find out. I got to her house and hid behind her big prickly hedge. Her kitchen window was wide open, and I peeked inside, holding my breath so she wouldn't hear me. There she was. Karen. Standing in her kitchen, wearing a big apron with flowers on it. And in her hands, my duck eggs. She had them 1, 2, 3 of them smooth and white, just like they always were. She cracked one into a bowl, then another, like she was making some fancy breakfast. Yellow yolk splashed into the bowl, and she smiled a little, like she was proud of herself. I couldn't believe my eyes. She stole them. She really stole my eggs. Then she said something that made my jaw drop. "Those ducks are a nuisance," she muttered, talking to herself like nobody could hear. "All that quacking and mess. These eggs are better off with me." She cracked the last egg and stirred the bowl with a big spoon, humming a little tune. A nuisance. My ducks? Waddles and Quackster weren't a nuisance, they were awesome. They didn't make a mess, they just waddled and quacked and laid eggs for me. Karen didn't even ask. She didn't knock on my door and say, "Hey, Sam, can I have some eggs?" Nope. She just took them because she thought she could. I ducked down behind the hedge, my brain spinning. I was so mad I wanted to yell. My face was burning, and my hands shook a little. Those eggs were mine. I worked hard to take care of my ducks, feeding them, cleaning their pen, making sure they were happy. And Karen just waltzed in and swiped them like they belonged to her. She didn't care about me or my ducks. She just cared about herself and her dumb HOA rules. I peeked up again, watching her stir that bowl. She looked so smug, like she'd gotten away with something big. "They're better off with me," she'd said. Better off with her? No way. My eggs weren't hers to take. She didn't know how much those eggs meant to me, how I'd grin every morning when I found them, how I'd carry them inside so careful, how they made breakfast taste like a treat. She didn't care about any of that. She just saw my ducks as a problem and my eggs as her prize. I wanted to bang on her door right then and there. I wanted to shout, "Give me back my eggs, you sneaky thief." I could picture it, me standing on her porch, pointing at her, telling her she couldn't boss me around. Maybe she'd turn red and stammer, maybe she'd try to make some excuse. I could yell loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear Karen stole my duck eggs. Oh, that'd show her. But I didn't do it. I stayed quiet, crouching behind that hedge, my heart pounding like a drum. Yelling might feel good, but it wouldn't fix anything. Karen would just say something mean, like, "Those ducks shouldn't even be here." She'd twist it around with her HOA rules and make me look like the bad guy. No, I had to be smarter than that. I had to think of something better, something that'd teach her a lesson she wouldn't forget. I took a deep breath and sneaked back home, my head buzzing with ideas. Karen thought she was so sneaky, taking my eggs and acting like the queen of the neighborhood. She thought I was just a kid who wouldn't do anything about it. Well, she didn't know me very well. I wasn't gonna let her win. Not today, not ever. I had a plan brewing, a really good one. She'd taken my eggs, but I was gonna take something back, maybe not the eggs, but something even better. She'd see. As I walked back to my house, I glanced at Waddles and Quackster in their pen. They quacked at me, waddling around like nothing was wrong. "Don't worry, guys," I whispered. "She's not gonna get away with this." I wasn't sure what I'd do yet, but I knew it'd be big. Karen might be the HOA boss, but I was Sam, the duck kid, and I wasn't scared of her. Not one bit. All right, friends, let's keep the story rolling. Where we left off, I just found out that sneaky Karen stole my duck eggs. My heart was pounding, my face was hot, and I was super mad. I'd seen her cracking my eggs into a bowl in her kitchen, acting like she was some fancy chef. She even said my ducks, Waddles and Quackster, were a nuisance. A nuisance. Can you believe that? My ducks are the best, and she had no right to take their eggs. But I didn't yell or bang on her door, not yet. I had a better idea brewing, and I was ready to make it happen. Let's dive back in. So there I was, sneaking away from Karen's house after spying on her through her window. My sneakers crunched on the gravel as I hurried back to my yard, keeping low so she wouldn't see me. My brain was buzzing like a beehive, full of thoughts about what she'd done. Those muddy footprints leading from my duck pen to her house were stuck in my head. They were big, sloppy proof that she'd marched right in and swiped my eggs. I couldn't stop picturing her smug face as she cracked them open, like she'd won some secret prize. When I got back to my yard, I stopped by the duck pen again. Waddles waddled over and pecked at my shoelaces, his little beak tapping away. Quackster stood by the puddle, shaking her feathers and quacking like she was asking me what was wrong. I knelt down and patted their soft heads. "Don't worry, guys," I said quietly. "She's not gonna keep doing this." I looked at their empty nest, and my tummy twisted again. Those eggs were gone, and it was all because of Karen. I sat on the grass next to the pen, pulling my knees up to my chin. I needed to think. Karen wasn't just any neighbor, she was part of the HOA, that group that makes all the rules. She walked around like she owned the whole street, telling people what to do. "Cut your grass," she'd yell at Mr. Thompson next door. "No loud music," she'd snap at the teenagers down the block. And now she'd decided my ducks were a problem. But instead of talking to me or my mom, she just took their eggs. That wasn't fair. Not even a little bit. I remembered what she'd said: "Those ducks are a nuisance." Her voice was all grumpy and mean, like she thought my ducks were some big trouble. But they weren't. Waddles and Quackster didn't hurt anybody. They stayed in their pen, quacking and waddling, minding their own business. Sure, they made noise sometimes. Quackster could get loud when she was excited, but that's just what ducks do. They're not like barking dogs or honking cars. They're just ducks. And the eggs? Those were mine to collect, not hers to steal. The more I thought about it, the madder I got. Karen didn't even like ducks. She'd glare at them every time she walked by, her nose all scrunched up like they smelled bad. But if she didn't like them, why take their eggs? Why not just leave us alone? I kicked a little rock across the yard, watching it bounce into the bushes. She took them because she could. Because she thought nobody would stop her. Because she thought I was just a kid who'd let it slide. Well, she was wrong about that. I wasn't gonna let it slide. I stood up, brushing grass off my pants, and looked at my ducks again. "She's not the boss of us," I told them. Waddles quacked like he agreed, and Quackster flapped her wings. I smiled a little, even though I was still mad. My ducks were counting on me, and I wasn't gonna let them down. I started pacing around the yard, thinking hard. What could I do? I could tell my mom, she'd be mad too, and maybe she'd go talk to Karen. But Karen was tricky. She'd probably say something like, "Oh, I didn't know those were your eggs," or "Those ducks shouldn't be here anyway." She'd twist it around with her HOA stuff and make it sound like we were the ones in trouble. My mom's nice, but she's busy with work, and I didn't want her stressing out over this. No, this was my problem to fix. I could go to Karen's house and ask for the eggs back. I pictured it in my head, me knocking on her door, standing there with my arms crossed. "Hey, Karen, those are my eggs. Give them back," I'd say, trying to sound tough. But then I imagined her laughing, her big glasses slipping down her nose. "Prove it," she'd say, all snooty. And I couldn't prove it, not really. Sure, I saw her with the eggs, but she'd already cracked them. They were gone, mixed up in that bowl. She'd just slam the door in my face and keep doing whatever she wanted. I stopped pacing and sat on the back steps, staring at the clouds. Yelling at her wouldn't work. Telling on her wouldn't work. I needed something sneaky, or something that'd make her stop without her knowing it was me. I tapped my fingers on my knee, thinking about Karen. She was bossy and rude, but she wasn't super smart about everything. She didn't even check if anyone saw her take the eggs. She just left those big footprints like a giant clue. Maybe I could use that against her. Maybe I could trick her somehow. That's when the idea hit me. It popped into my head like a light turning on. What if I made her think she was still getting eggs, but they weren't real? I grinned, imagining it. Fake eggs. Something that looked like duck eggs but wasn't. She'd take them, crack them, and bam, she'd figure out she couldn't keep stealing from me. It'd be funny, and it'd teach her a lesson. My heart started racing again, but this time it wasn't from being mad, it was from excitement. I jumped up and ran inside, my sneakers squeaking on the floor. "Mom!" I called. She was in the kitchen, washing dishes. "Do we have any fake eggs? Like, plastic ones or something?" She turned around, her hands all soapy, and gave me a funny look. "Fake eggs? What for, Sam?" she asked. I didn't want to tell her everything not yet, so I just shrugged. Just a project," I said, grinning. She raised an eyebrow but didn't push it. "Check the craft box in the garage," she said. "We might have some from Easter." I bolted to the garage, my mind racing. The craft box was this big plastic tub full of old stuff: paint, yarn, glitter, all kinds of things. I dug through it, tossing stuff aside. There, at the bottom, under a pile of pipe cleaners, was a little bag of plastic eggs. They were white, smooth, and just the right size, almost exactly like Waddles and Quackster's eggs. I held one up, turning it in my hand. It wasn't perfect, but it was close enough. If Karen wasn't looking too hard, she'd never know the difference. I stuffed the fake eggs in my pocket and ran back outside. The sun was getting lower now, turning the sky all orange and pink. I had to hurry. Karen might come back tomorrow morning to steal more eggs. I checked the pen again. Waddles and Quackster were still there, waddling around, happy as ever. "You guys are geniuses," I said, laughing. They didn't know it, but they were helping me with my plan. I didn't have any real eggs to swap yet. Karen had taken today's, but I could set this up for tomorrow. I'd watch her, see when she came, and then I'd sneak in the fake ones. She'd grab them, thinking she'd won again, and then surprise. No yummy breakfast for her, just a big fat nothing. I giggled, picturing her face all confused and mad. It was perfect. But I had to be careful. Karen wasn't dumb, she'd notice if something was super off. I held a fake egg up to the light, checking it. It looked good, but it didn't feel exactly like a real egg. Real ones were a tiny bit heavier and warm from the ducks. These were cold and light. I'd have to make sure she didn't hold them too long before taking them. Maybe I could put them in the nest right before she showed up, so she'd grab them quick and go. I sat back down by the pen, holding the fake eggs in my lap. The plan was coming together, but I still felt a little nervous. What if she caught me? What if she saw me sneaking around and yelled at me? She'd probably march over to my mom and make a big fuss. "Your kid's messing with me," she'd say, all loud and dramatic. I didn't want that. This had to be secret, super sneaky, like a ninja. I looked at Waddles and Quackster again. They were splashing in their puddle now, making little ripples. "You guys are worth it," I said. Karen could glare and steal and boss people around, but she wasn't gonna beat me. I was Sam, the duck kid, and I had a trick up my sleeve. She thought she was the queen of the neighborhood, but she was about to find out she couldn't push me around. The sky was getting darker, and I knew I had to wait till tomorrow to see if my plan worked. I stood up, brushing dirt off my hands. "Sleep tight, guys," I told my ducks. "Tomorrow's gonna be a big day." I headed inside, the fake eggs jingling in my pocket. Karen had started this fight, but I was gonna finish it my way. Okay, friends, let's keep this story going. Things are about to get sneaky and fun. After I found out Karen was stealing my duck eggs, I wasn't just gonna sit there and let it happen. Oh no, I had a plan, and it was time to put it into action. I was mad, but I was also excited because I was gonna trick her good. So, here's what happened next. The next few days after I saw Karen with my eggs, I turned into a ninja. Not a real ninja with a sword or anything, but a sneaky kid who watched everything she did. I had to know exactly how she was stealing from my ducks, Waddles and Quackster. Every morning, I'd wake up super early, before the sun was even all the way up. I'd rub my eyes, pull on my sneakers, and tiptoe to my bedroom window. It looked right out at the backyard where the duck pen was. I'd peek through the curtains, holding my breath, waiting to see what she'd do. And she did it every single day. Karen would come waddling over, yep, waddling, just like my ducks. She didn't walk all fancy or fast. She'd shuffle along in her big floppy slippers, her bathrobe flapping around her legs. She'd look left and right, like she was checking if anyone was watching. But she never saw me, hiding behind my curtain like a secret spy. Her hair was messy, sticking up all over, and she had that same pinched up face, like she was already mad at the world. She'd get to the duck pen and stop. Waddles and Quackster would be waddling around inside, quacking a little, not knowing what was coming. Karen would bend down real slow, because I guess her back wasn't great, and reach into the nest. She'd grab the eggs, 1, 2, sometimes 3, whatever was there. Her hands would close around them, and she'd pull them out fast, like she was scared someone might catch her. Then she'd smirk this little smile that made my tummy twist. It was like she thought she'd won a prize, like stealing my eggs made her the champ of the neighborhood. I'd watch her stuff the eggs in her bathrobe pockets, pat them like they were hers, and waddle back to her house. She'd disappear inside, and I'd sit there by my window, my hands in fists. Every day was the same. She'd show up, snatch the eggs, and leave before I could even get outside. I tried waking up earlier one time just as the sky was turning pink, but she was too fast. By the time I got to the pen, the eggs were gone, and those muddy footprints were back, leading straight to her house. It made me so mad. Those were my eggs, from my ducks. I'd been taking care of Waddles and Quackster forever, feeding them little bits of corn, filling their water puddle, making sure their straw was soft. And Karen? She didn't do anything but glare at them and steal their hard work. She didn't even like ducks. She'd said they were a nuisance. So why was she taking their eggs? I didn't get it, but I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't gonna let her keep doing it. Here's the thing, though, I couldn't just run out and yell at her. I'd thought about it a million times, picturing myself standing by the pen, shouting, "Stop it, Karen. Those are mine." But she'd probably just laugh or say something mean, like, "These ducks shouldn't be here anyway." She'd use her HOA rules to make me look bad, and I'd end up in trouble instead of her. No way. I had to be smarter than that. I had to trick her so she'd stop without even knowing it was me. That's when I remembered my idea from before: the fake eggs. I'd found those plastic ones in the garage, the kind you use for Easter egg hunts. They were white and smooth, almost exactly like real duck eggs. When I'd held one up, I had to squint to make sure it wasn't real. They were perfect for my plan. If I could swap the real eggs for the fakes, Karen would take them, think she'd won again, and then surprise, she'd figure out she couldn't keep stealing. It'd be funny, and it'd teach her a lesson. So, I went to the store with my allowance money. I rode my bike down the street, the wind whooshing past my ears. The little shop on the corner had all kinds of stuff: candy, toys, and, lucky for me, a pack of plastic eggs. They were in a clear bag, hanging by the craft stuff. I grabbed them and checked them out. There were 10 eggs inside, all white and shiny. I held one up to the light. It looked so real. Even I had to double check, feeling it in my hand. It wasn't warm like a duck egg, and it was a tiny bit lighter, but Karen wouldn't notice if she was quick. I paid the lady at the counter, stuffed the bag in my backpack, and pedaled home fast. When I got back, I hid the fake eggs under my bed so my mom wouldn't ask questions. I had to wait for the right time to use them. I kept watching Karen every morning, counting how many eggs she took and when she showed up. She was sneaky, but she wasn't super smart about it. She always came around the same time, just after the sun came up, before I usually went out to check the pen. She'd grab the eggs and leave those big footprints behind, like she didn't even care if someone saw. That made me grin. She thought she was so clever, but she was leaving clues everywhere. Finally, I picked the perfect night to start my plan. It was a Friday, and the sky was dark with little stars twinkling. I waited until my mom was asleep. She goes to bed early because she works a lot. I could hear her snoring softly down the hall. I pulled on my dark hoodie and grabbed the bag of fake eggs from under my bed. My heart was thumping loud, like it wanted to jump out of my chest. I was nervous, but I was excited too. This was it, time to trick Karen. I tiptoed downstairs, super quiet so the floor wouldn't creak. I slipped out the back door into the yard. The air was cool, and the grass was wet under my sneakers. I could hear crickets chirping and an owl hooting somewhere far away. The duck pen was quiet. Waddles and Quackster were asleep, curled up in their straw. I crept over, holding the fake eggs tight in my hands. The real eggs were already in the nest, 2 of them, laid that day. I'd checked earlier when Karen didn't come by in the afternoon. I knelt down by the pen, my knees sinking into the dirt. I reached in real slow, picking up the real eggs one by one. They were warm and smooth, just like always. I put them in my hoodie pocket, careful not to crack them. Then I took 2 fake eggs from the bag and set them in the nest, right where the real ones had been. I moved the straw around a little so it looked natural, like the ducks had laid them there. I leaned back and checked my work. In the dark, they looked perfect white and shiny, just like the real thing. I grabbed the real eggs and snuck back to the house. I hid them in a little box under the back steps, a secret spot Karen would never find. My ducks deserved to keep their eggs safe, and I wasn't gonna let her have them anymore. I went back inside, locked the door, and ran upstairs to my room. I couldn't sleep yet, I was too excited. Tomorrow was gonna be the big test. Would Karen fall for it? I hoped so. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. The sky was just turning light, all gray and soft. I jumped out of bed, pulled on my sneakers, and ran to the window. I peeked out, hiding behind the curtain like always. My heart was racing. Would she come? I didn't have to wait long. There she was, Karen, waddling over in her bathrobe and slippers, same as every day. She looked sleepy, rubbing her eyes, but she had that smirk already, like she knew what she was gonna get. She got to the pen and bent down, reaching into the nest. I held my breath, my nose pressed to the glass. Her hand came out with the fake eggs, 2 of them, clutched tight. She didn't even look at them long, just stuffed them in her pocket and turned around. She marched back to her house, her slippers slapping the ground. I waited till she was inside, then I clapped my hands over my mouth so I wouldn't laugh out loud. She took them. She really took the fake eggs. I flopped onto my bed, giggling so hard I almost fell off. My whole body shook, I couldn't stop. She had no idea what was coming. She thought she'd stolen my eggs again, but this time, she'd cracked open a big surprise. I pictured her in her kitchen, cracking those plastic eggs into her bowl, crack, crack, and nothing coming out. No yellow yolk, no breakfast, just empty shells. Oh man, I wished I could see her face. I rolled onto my back, staring at the ceiling, still laughing. It worked. My ninja plan worked. Karen thought she was so sneaky, but I was sneakier. I'd swapped the eggs right under her nose, and she didn't even know. I felt like a superhero, like I'd saved the day for Waddles and Quackster. But this was just the start. She'd figure it out soon, and I had to be ready for what happened next. I got up and looked out the window again. Her house was quiet, no yelling, no stomping yet. She must have just gotten inside. I wondered how long it'd take her to crack those eggs and see they were fake. Would she be mad? Confused? Would she come back and check the pen again? I didn't know, but I was gonna watch. This wasn't over, not yet. Karen had been stealing from me for days, and now it was my turn to win. Alright, friends, buckle up because this is the best part of the story so far. Everything I'd been planning, the sneaking, the watching, the fake eggs, it all led up to this one big moment. It was wild, it was loud, and it was so much fun. Let's jump in and see what happened when Karen finally figured out she'd been tricked. The big moment came the very next day after I swapped the real eggs for the fakes. It was a sunny Saturday morning, and I was outside in the backyard, feeding Waddles and Quackster like I always do. The sun was shining bright, making the grass all sparkly with dew. I had a little cup of corn in my hand, tossing it to my ducks. Waddles waddled over fast, his big feet flapping, gobbling up the corn like it was candy. Quackster stayed by the puddle, quacking loud and bossy, waiting for me to toss some her way. I laughed, watching them. "You guys are the best," I said, grinning big. I was feeling pretty good. My sneaky plan with the fake eggs had worked. Karen had taken them yesterday morning, thinking they were real. I'd watched her waddle off with them, smirking like she'd won again. But I knew the truth. Those plastic eggs were sitting in her kitchen right now, and she had no idea what was coming. I tossed more corn to Waddles, wondering when she'd crack them open. Would it be today? Tomorrow? I couldn't wait to find out. Then it happened, boom. A scream came from Karen's house, so loud it made me jump. "What is this?" she yelled. Her voice was shrill, like a whistle, cutting through the quiet morning. I dropped the cup of corn, and it spilled all over the grass. Waddles pecked at it, but I didn't care. I turned toward her house, my eyes wide. This was it. She'd found out. Before I could even move, Karen came storming out her front door. She was a sight to see, let me tell you. Her hair was sticking up like a bird's nest, all wild and messy. Her face was redder than a ripe tomato, seriously, bright red, like she'd been holding her breath too long. In one hand, she held a frying pan, gripping it tight like she might hit something. In her other hand, a cracked plastic egg, one of my fake ones. The shell was split open, showing it was hollow inside, no yolk, no nothing. She waved it around like a crazy person, stomping across her yard toward mine. I stood there by the duck pen, frozen for a second. My heart was thumping fast, but I wasn't scared, not really. This was my moment, the big payoff for all my sneaking around. Karen spotted me and charged over, her slippers slapping the ground, loud slap, slap, slap. She was coming right at me, her eyes big and wild behind those huge glasses. "Sam," she shouted, so loud the whole neighborhood could hear. "Did you do this?" She stopped a few feet away, holding up the frying pan in one hand and the cracked fake egg in the other. Her bathrobe was flapping open, showing her polka dot pajamas underneath. She looked ridiculous, like a cartoon character gone nuts. I crossed my arms over my chest and grinned, I couldn't help it. Her yelling was loud, but my smile was bigger. "Maybe I did," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Maybe you shouldn't have stolen my duck eggs, huh?" Her jaw dropped, literally dropped, like in a movie. Her mouth hung open, and her eyes got even wider, if that was possible. She didn't say anything for a second, just stared at me with that red face and that fake egg shaking in her hand. I could tell she didn't expect me to talk back. She thought I'd be scared or run away, but nope, I stood my ground, right there by Waddles and Quaxter's pen. This was my yard, my ducks, and I wasn't letting her boss me around anymore. Then the best part happened. Neighbors started peeking out. Oh yeah, they heard everything. Old Mr. Thompson next door popped his head over the fence, his gray hair sticking up like Karen's. "What's all this noise?" he called, squinting at us. Across the street, Mrs. Lopez opened her window, leaning out with a big grin. Two kids down the block, Tommy and Lily, ran to their porch, whispering and pointing. People were watching, and they were laughing. Little giggles and chuckles floated over, soft at first, then louder. Karen noticed too. She turned her head fast, looking around, her face getting even redder if that was possible. The frying pan drooped a little in her hand, and the fake egg wobbled like she might drop it. She wasn't the big HOA queen anymore, not right now. She was just a lady in a bathrobe, holding a plastic egg, yelling at a kid. Her big power trip, the one where she bossed everyone around and stole my eggs, was falling apart, right there in front of everybody. I kept grinning, watching her squirm. "What's wrong, Karen?" I said, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "Don't like my eggs anymore." That made Tommy and Lily laugh out loud, big, happy giggles that echoed across the street. Mrs. Lopez clapped her hand over her mouth, trying not to laugh, but I saw her shoulders shaking. Even Mr. Thompson snorted, like he couldn't hold it in. Karen's eyes darted around, and her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She didn't know what to say, she just stood there, looking like a total fool. Let me tell you what she looked like up close. Her bathrobe was old and faded, with little flowers that used to be pink but were now kind of gray. Her slippers were floppy, with holes in the toes, and her pajamas had polka dots, big red ones that clashed with her red face. The frying pan was dented, like she'd banged it on something before, and the fake egg? It was cracked right in half, showing the smooth plastic inside. She'd probably smacked it hard, expecting yolk, and got nothing but a big surprise. She finally found her voice, but it came out all squeaky. This is outrageous," she yelled, waving the egg at me. "You can't just trick people like this." She stomped her foot, and her slipper flopped off, landing in the grass. That made the neighbors laugh even harder. Tommy pointed and shouted, "She lost her shoe." Karen's face went from red to purple, and she bent down to grab the slipper, still holding the pen and the egg. She looked so silly, I almost felt bad for her. Almost. I shrugged, keeping my arms crossed. "I didn't trick you for fun," I said. "You took my eggs first. I just gave you something to think about." Her mouth snapped shut, and she glared at me, her glasses slipping down her nose. She didn't have a good answer. She knew I was right. She'd been sneaking into my yard, taking what wasn't hers, and now everyone could see it. The neighbors weren't laughing at me, they were laughing at her. Karen straightened up, clutching her slipper to her chest like a shield. "Those ducks are a problem," she said, pointing at Waddles and Quackster with the frying pan. "They're loud, and they're messy, and I'm HOA. I make the rules." But her voice was wobbly now, not strong like before. She sounded like a kid throwing a tantrum, not a grown-up in charge. Waddles quacked at her, flapping his wings, and Quackster joined in, loud and proud. It was like they were saying, "We're not the problem, you are." Mr. Thompson leaned over the fence again. "They're just ducks, Karen," he said, shaking his head. "Better than your yappy dog last year." Mrs. Lopez nodded from her window. "Yeah, leave the kid alone," she called. The neighbors were on my side, and Karen knew it. Her big HOA power trip was crumbling fast, like a sandcastle when the waves come in. She couldn't boss them around right now, not with that frying pan and fake egg making her look so goofy. She turned back to me, her lips tight. "This isn't over, Sam," she said, trying to sound tough. But her voice cracked, and she didn't look scary, just mad and embarrassed. She spun around, her bathrobe flapping, and stomped back to her house. Her slipper fell off again, but she didn't stop this time, she just kept going, leaving it in the grass. The door slammed behind her, loud enough to make Waddles jump. I stood there, still grinning, as the neighbors clapped and cheered. Tommy and Lily ran over, hopping up and down. "That was awesome, Sam," Tommy said. "She looked so funny." Lily giggled, pointing at the slipper. "She's gonna be mad forever." I laughed too, feeling big and proud. My ducks waddled over, quacking like they were cheering with us. I'd done it, I'd tricked Karen, and now everyone knew she wasn't as tough as she acted. I picked up the spilled corn cup and tossed some more to Waddles and Quackster. "You guys are the real heroes," I said. They didn't know it, but they'd help me win this round. Karen's scream, her red face, that frying pan, all of it was because of my fake eggs. She'd thought she could keep stealing, but I showed her I wasn't just some kid she could push around. The neighbors saw it, and she couldn't hide it anymore. I looked at her house, the curtains closed tight now. She was probably inside, fuming, maybe banging that frying pan on the counter. But out here? I'd won. My ducks were safe, and Karen's big HOA attitude was a joke. This was the best day ever, and it wasn't even lunchtime yet. Hey friends. Let's keep this wild story going. We're right in the middle of the big moment, the climax where everything explodes in the best way. Karen just freaked out over my fake eggs, and now she's facing the music. I'm not done yet, though. I've got more to tell you about how this all played out, with neighbors, ducks, and a very mad Karen. Here we go. So there I was, standing by the duck pen, watching Karen storm back to her house after her big yelling fit. Her slipper was still lying in the grass, all lonely and floppy, and her door slammed so hard it made the windows rattle. My grin was huge, I couldn't stop smiling. Waddles and Quackster quacked at me, flapping their wings like they knew something awesome had just happened. "You guys are the champs," I said, tossing them a little more corn from the cup I'd dropped earlier. They pecked at it happily, and I felt like a superhero. Karen had charged over with that frying pan and cracked plastic egg, screaming, "What is this?" like I'd ruined her whole life. And when I said, "Maybe you shouldn't have stolen my duck eggs," her face, oh man, her face. It went from red to purple, and her jaw dropped so low I thought it might hit the ground. She didn't expect me to talk back, she thought she could yell and I'd just run away scared. But nope. I stood there, arms crossed, grinning like I'd just won a prize. And in a way, I had. The neighbors were still watching, and that made it even better. Tommy and Lily, the kids from down the street, were jumping up and down on their porch, laughing so hard they could barely talk. "She's so mad, Sam," Tommy shouted, pointing at Karen's house. Lily nodded, her pigtails bouncing. "That egg trick was the best," she said. I waved at them, feeling big and brave. Mrs. Lopez was still leaning out her window, giggling behind her hand, and Mr. Thompson was shaking his head like he couldn't believe what he'd just seen. Everyone was on my side, and Karen couldn't do a thing about it. I looked back at where she'd been standing, the grass all flattened from her stomping. That frying pan in her hand, it was so funny. She'd waved it around like she was gonna cook me or something, but all she had was that fake egg, cracked and empty. I bet she'd gone into her kitchen that morning, all ready to make a big breakfast with my duck eggs. She probably heated up the pan, maybe hummed a little song, thinking she'd stolen another win. Then crack, she smashed that plastic egg, and nothing came out. No yellow yolk, no white, just a big fat zero. That's when she lost it and ran out screaming. Thinking about it made me giggle all over again. I bent down to fix the corn I'd spilled, scooping it back into the cup. Waddles waddled over and pecked at my fingers, like he was saying thanks. Quackster stayed by the puddle, splashing a little, quacking loud and proud. They didn't know it, but they were the stars of this whole thing. Their eggs, well, the fake ones had turned Karen's sneaky plan upside down. She thought she was the boss, taking whatever she wanted, but now she looked silly, and I was the one laughing. The neighbors weren't done yet, either. Mr. Thompson called over the fence again. "Good job, Sam," he said, giving me a big thumbs up. "That lady's been bossing us around too long." His voice was scratchy, like he smoked too many cigars, but he sounded happy. Mrs. Lopez clapped her hands from her window. "You showed her, kid," she said. "No more egg stealing for her." Even the mailman, who was walking by with his big blue bag, stopped to look. He saw Karen's slipper in the grass and chuckled. "What's going on here?" he asked, and Tommy yelled, "Sam tricked the mean lady with fake eggs." The mailman laughed and kept walking, shaking his head. I stood up straight, brushing dirt off my hands. This was bigger than I'd planned. I just wanted to stop Karen from taking my eggs, but now the whole street was talking about it. Karen's big HOA power trip, the one where she acted like she ruled everything, was falling apart right in front of everybody. She always walked around with that clipboard, telling people what to do. "No bikes on the sidewalk," she'd snap at Tommy and Lily. "Paint your fence," she'd tell Mrs. Lopez. But now, she was the lady with the frying pan and the fake egg, and nobody was scared of her anymore. I glanced at her house again. The curtains were still closed, but I could imagine her inside, pacing around, muttering to herself. Maybe she was banging that frying pan on the counter, mad as a wet cat. "How dare he," she'd say, her voice all high and squeaky. "I'm HOA. I'm in charge." But out here, she wasn't in charge, not today. Today, I was the one who won, and it felt awesome. Tommy and Lily ran over to my yard, their sneakers squeaking on the wet grass. "Sam, that was so cool," Tommy said, his eyes big. "How'd you trick her?" Lily nodded, hopping from one foot to the other. "Yeah, tell us." I grinned and held up my hands like a magician. "It's a secret," I said, winking. "But let's just say those eggs weren't real." They laughed again, and Tommy pretended to crack an egg over Lily's head. "No breakfast for Karen," he said, and we all cracked up. I looked at Waddles and Quackster, still munching their corn. "You guys started this," I said to them. "If she hadn't messed with your eggs, none of this would have happened." Quackster quacked loud, like she was agreeing, and Waddles waddled in a little circle, showing off. I loved those ducks, they were my buddies, and I'd stuck up for them. Karen thought they were a nuisance, but to me, they were the best pets ever. The laughing died down a little, and I started wondering what Karen would do next. She'd said, "This isn't over, Sam," before she stomped off. Her voice was all shaky, but she meant it. She wasn't gonna let this go easy. I knew she'd try something else, maybe complain to the HOA or tell my mom. But right now, I didn't care. I'd won this round, and everybody saw it. Her big scream, that red face, the frying pan, it was all because of me and my fake eggs. She couldn't hide from that. I sat down on the grass by the pen, letting Waddles climb into my lap. He's heavy for a duck, but I didn't mind. Quackster stayed by the puddle, splashing and quacking, keeping an eye on me. The neighbors went back to their houses. Mr. Thompson shuffled inside, Mrs. Lopez closed her window, and Tommy and Lily ran off to play. The street got quiet again, just the sound of ducks and birds chirping. But I kept smiling, replaying it all in my head. Karen's meltdown was the best thing I'd ever seen. I could still hear her yelling, "What is this?" like it was echoing in my ears. I could still see her waving that frying pan, the fake egg cracked in her hand, her slipper falling off. It was so funny, but it was more than that. It was proof she couldn't boss me around forever. She'd stolen my eggs for days, thinking I wouldn't do anything. But I did. I tricked her, and now she knew I wasn't just some kid she could ignore. I hugged Waddles, his feathers soft against my cheek. We showed her, huh? I said. He quacked softly, like he was proud to. I looked at Karen's house one more time. The slipper was still there in the grass, a little reminder of what happened. She'd come get it eventually, I guess, but for now, it was like a trophy, a sign that I'd won this fight. The sun climbed higher, warming up the yard. I stood up, brushing grass off my pants, and gave Waddles and Quackster the rest of the corn. You guys deserve a treat, I said. They waddled around, happy and full, and I felt happy too. This wasn't just about eggs anymore, it was about standing up for what's mine. Karen's big HOA attitude didn't scare me, not after this. She could yell all she wanted, but I'd shown her I was tougher than she thought. I started walking back to the house, thinking about what might happen next. Karen wasn't done, I knew that. She'd try to get back at me somehow, maybe with rules or something mean. But I wasn't worried. I had my ducks, my neighbors, and a big win under my belt. This morning was the best ever, and I'd remember it forever, the day Karen's power trip crashed, all because of a few fake eggs and a kid who wouldn't give up. Hey friends. We're at the end of this crazy duck egg adventure now, and it's time to wrap things up. The big showdown with Karen was wild, but what happened after was just as cool. She got what she deserved, and me and my ducks came out on top. Let's see how it all finished. Get ready for some fun and a happy ending. After that big moment when Karen freaked out with her frying pan and fake egg, things changed fast. She didn't mess with my ducks anymore, not even a little bit. It was like she'd learned her lesson, and I was so happy about it. That day she stormed back to her house, red-faced and embarrassed. Was the last time I saw her anywhere near my duck pen. No more sneaky waddling over in her bathrobe, no more snatching eggs from Waddles and Quackster. She was done, and I'd made it happen. Word started spreading around the neighborhood like wildfire. You know how grown UPS love to talk? Well, they couldn't stop talking about what went down. By lunchtime that same day, Tommy and Lily were already telling everyone they saw kids at the park, their parents, even the ice cream man. Sam tricked Karen with fake eggs, they'd say, laughing and hopping around. She yelled so loud, and then she ran away. I heard them from my yard and grinned. It was cool hearing my name like that, like I was a hero or something. Pretty soon, the grown UPS got in on it too. Mrs. Lopez was chatting with Mr. Thompson over the fence, and I heard her say, that Karen's been bossing us around forever, and Sam fixed her good. Mr. Thompson nodded, puffing on his cigar. Yep, she's the egg lady now, he said, chuckling. Egg lady. That's what they started calling her behind her back, of course, because nobody wanted her yelling at them. But every time someone said it, they'd laugh, and I'd smile bigger. It was the perfect name for her after all that egg-stealing nonsense. Karen didn't like it one bit, though. A few days later, there was an HOA meeting, you know, that group she was part of that makes rules for the neighborhood. I wasn't there, but Tommy's dad went, and he told us all about it. Karen stood up in front of everybody, her clipboard in hand, trying to act all big and important again. She cleared her throat and said, "We need to talk about those ducks on Sam's property. They're a problem, and I've been, inconvenienced by them." She didn't say stolen eggs out loud, but everyone knew what she meant. Tommy's dad said. The room got quiet for a second, and then somebody snickered. Then another person laughed, and soon the whole place was giggling. One lady, Mrs. Carter from down the street, called out, "You mean the eggs you took, Karen?" That made everyone laugh harder, and Tommy's dad said Karen's face went red all over again, just like when she yelled at me. She slammed her clipboard down and shouted, "This is serious," but nobody listened. They just kept laughing, and she sat down real fast, looking mad and small. Turns out, stealing eggs doesn't make you look tough, it makes you look silly. That's what Tommy's dad said, and he was right. Karen thought she could boss everyone around because she was HOA, but after the fake egg trick, nobody took her seriously anymore. She tried to complain at that meeting, but it backfired big time. People didn't see her as the rule-maker queen, they saw her as the egg lady who got caught. And that was that. She couldn't scare anybody with her clipboard after that. As for me, life got so much better. I kept collecting my real duck eggs every day, safe and sound, just like before Karen started her sneaky stuff. Every morning, I'd run out to the pen with my little basket, excited to see what Waddles and Quackster left for me. I'd peek into the straw, and there they'd be 2 or 3 perfect little eggs, white and smooth, waiting just for me. I'd pick them up super careful, holding them in my hands like they were treasures. And they were my ducks made them, and nobody was gonna take them away again. Waddles and Quackster even seemed prouder after all this. I swear it's true. They'd waddle around their pen like little champs, heads held high, quacking loud and happy. Waddles would flop his big feet and chase me around, pecking at my shoelaces like he was playing. Quackster would stand by the puddle, flapping her wings and quacking like she was the boss of everything. I'd sit with them sometimes, just watching, and I'd laugh. "You guys are the best," I'd say, and they'd quack back like they agreed. They didn't know about the fake eggs or Karen's meltdown, but they knew they were safe now, and that made them happy. I'd won, and it felt awesome, like the best feeling ever. No more sneaky Karen creeping into my yard. No more missing eggs when I went to check the nest. Just me and my ducks, living our best life, doing what we loved. I'd feed them corn, fill their puddle with fresh water, and collect those eggs every day. Sometimes I'd take them inside and show my mom. "Look what Waddles and Quackster made," I'd say, and she'd smile. "Better keep those safe from you-know-who," she'd tease, and we'd laugh together. Karen was just a funny story now, not a problem. The neighborhood felt different too. People were nicer to me after that day. Mr. Thompson would wave when he saw me, yelling, "How's those ducks, Sam?" from his porch. Mrs. Lopez started bringing me cookies, sometimes chocolate chip ones, my favorite. "For the duck kid," she'd say, winking. Even the mailman would stop and chat when he dropped off our letters. "Heard you're the hero around here," he said once, grinning. I'd shrug and say, "Just helping my ducks," but inside, I felt big and proud. Karen didn't disappear, of course she still lived 2 houses down. I'd see her sometimes, walking around with her clipboard, trying to look important again. But she didn't glare at my ducks anymore. If she passed by my yard, she'd keep her head down, walking fast like she didn't want me to see her. Once, I caught her looking at the pen from her porch, and I waved real big. "Hey, Karen," I called, holding up an egg, a real one. Her face got all tight, and she turned away quick. I laughed so hard I almost dropped the egg. She knew I'd won, and she didn't like it one bit. One day, about a week later, I found her slipper still in the grass where she'd dropped it. It was all dirty now, with mud and little twigs stuck to it. I picked it up and tossed it into her yard, not mean, just casual, like it didn't matter. She didn't come out to get it, but I saw her peek through her curtains. I waved again, grinning, and she shut them fast. That slipper was like a reminder Karen's big meltdown left a mark, and she couldn't erase it. School started up again soon after, and even there, people knew about the egg lady. Tommy and Lily told all our friends, and by recess, kids were asking me, "Did you really trick her with fake eggs, Sam?" I'd nod and say, "Yep, she didn't know what hit her." They'd laugh and cheer, and some even said I should bring Waddles and Quackster to show and tell. I didn't. They'd get too nervous, but I told everyone about them, how they were the coolest ducks ever. It was fun being the kid with the best story. Back home, I kept things simple. Every morning, I'd check the pen, collect the eggs, and feed my ducks. I'd sit with them sometimes, just talking. "You guys are safe now," I'd say, and Waddles would peck at my knee like he understood. Quackster would quack loud, like she was saying, "We're the bosses." I'd laugh and toss them extra corn. They deserved it after everything. Karen tried to act normal, like nothing happened, but it didn't work. At the next HOA meeting, Tommy's dad told me this one too. She didn't even bring up the ducks. She just talked about boring stuff, like trash pickup and new mailboxes. Nobody laughed this time, but Tommy's dad said people were still whispering egg lady when she wasn't looking. She'd lost her power, and I'd helped make that happen. Stealing eggs didn't make her tough, it made her a joke, and the neighborhood wasn't forgetting it. One afternoon, I was out by the pen, fixing the straw, when Mrs. Lopez came over with more cookies. "You did good, Sam," she said, handing me the plate. "That lady needed a lesson." I took a cookie, warm and gooey, and smiled. "Thanks," I said. "I just wanted my ducks to be okay." She nodded. "They're lucky to have you," she said, and walked back home. I sat there, munching the cookie, watching Waddles and Quackster splash in their puddle. She was right, they were lucky, and so was I. Days turned into weeks, and everything stayed peaceful. No more muddy footprints, no more missing eggs. I'd check the nest every morning, and there'd be my treasures, 2 or 3 little eggs, safe and sound. I'd cook them with my mom sometimes, or save them for a big breakfast on weekends. Waddles and Quackster kept waddling around, happy as ever, and I kept grinning every time I saw them. Karen stayed away, and that was the best part of all. Looking back, I'd won more than just eggs. I'd stood up to someone mean, someone who thought she could take whatever she wanted. And I'd done it my way with a sneaky trick and a big laugh. The neighborhood was better without her bossing us around so much, and my ducks were safe. That felt awesome, like I'd made a little piece of the world right again. Just me, a kid with ducks, and a pack of fake eggs that changed everything. Hey friends! We've made it to the very end of this duck egg adventure, and now it's time to think about what it all means. I've told you about Karen, my ducks Waddles and Quackster, and how I tricked her with fake eggs. It was a wild ride, full of sneaky plans and big laughs, but there's more to it than just a funny story. Let's sit down together like we're hanging out by the duck pen and talk about what I learned. It's simple stuff, easy to get, and maybe it'll make you think too. Here we go. So here's the thing, friends, sometimes the people who act all big and bossy aren't as strong as they seem. Take Karen. She walked around our neighborhood like she was the queen, telling everyone what to do. She'd glare at my ducks, steal their eggs, and wave that clipboard like it made her super important. She acted tough, like nobody could stop her, and for a while, I thought she was unbeatable. She was part of the HOA, after all. Grown ups listen to that stuff, right? But when I tricked her with those fake eggs, everything changed. She wasn't big or tough anymore. She was just a lady with a frying pan, yelling about nothing, looking silly in front of everybody. That got me thinking. Maybe people like Karen act bossy because they're hiding something. Maybe deep down, they feel small or scared, and being mean makes them feel bigger. I mean, why else would she steal my eggs instead of asking? She didn't have to. She could have knocked on my door and said, "Hey, Sam, can I have an egg?" I might have said yes. But nope, she snuck around, taking what wasn't hers, because that's how she felt strong. When I caught her with those plastic eggs, though, all that strength fell apart. Her red face, her dropped slipper, the neighbors laughing, it showed she wasn't so big after all. She was just pretending. I didn't need to yell or fight to beat her, and that's the cool part. I could have run over and shouted, "Give me my eggs back." I could have told my mom or banged on her door. But that wouldn't have worked. Karen would have twisted it around, said I was wrong, and kept being sneaky. Instead, I used my brain. I watched her, figured out her trick, and came up with my own. A few plastic eggs from the store. It was so simple. I swapped them out, waited, and let her figure it out herself. When she cracked those fake eggs and screamed, "What is this?" that was better than any yelling I could have done. She showed herself up, and I didn't even have to raise my voice. That's what I want you to think about, friends. Next time someone tries to take what's yours, maybe a toy, or your spot in line, or something you love, maybe you don't have to fight with fists or loud words. Maybe you've got a clever trick up your sleeve too, just like I did. It doesn't have to be fake eggs, could be anything smart that turns it around on them. I bet you're full of good ideas, stuff I'd never even think of. You don't always have to be the loudest or the strongest to win, you just have to be sneaky and brave in your own way. Let me tell you how it felt when I won. Standing there by the duck pen, watching Karen storm off, I felt huge, like I could do anything. Waddles and Quackster were quacking, the neighbors were cheering, and I knew I'd done something big. It wasn't just about the eggs, it was about standing up for what's mine. Karen thought I was just a kid, someone she could push around because I'm not tall or loud or bossy like her. But I showed her I'm more than that. I'm Sam, the duck kid, and I've got brains and heart, and that's enough to beat anyone who tries to mess with me. You've got that too, I bet. You might not have ducks or fake eggs, but you've got something special, something that makes you strong, even if nobody sees it right away. Maybe it's how you help your friends, or how you figure stuff out, or how you don't give up when things get hard. Karen didn't see my strength until it was too late, and that's the trick. Sometimes the quiet ones, the ones who don't act all big, are the toughest of all. What do you think? Have you ever surprised someone by being stronger than they thought? I'd love to hear about it. This whole thing started because I love my ducks. Waddles and Quackster aren't just pets, they're my buddies. They waddle around, quack at me, and lay those little eggs that make me smile every day. When Karen took them, it wasn't just about breakfast, it was like she was taking something I cared about. That's why I fought back, not with anger, but with a plan. And when I won, it wasn't just for me, it was for them too. They're safe now, waddling like little champs, and that makes everything worth it. What's something you love that you'd fight for? Maybe a pet, or a toy, or your family. I bet you'd be just as clever as me if someone tried to mess with it. Looking back, I'm glad I didn't let Karen scare me. She was loud and mean, and at first, I thought she'd always win. But I didn't give up. I watched, I planned, and I tricked her good. Now she's the egg lady, and I'm the kid who stopped her. It's funny how things turn out, right? Sometimes the person who seems big and scary ends up looking small, and the little guy like me comes out on top. That's how life works, I think. It's not about how loud you are, it's about what you do when someone tries to take what's yours. So what about you, friends? How would you get even if someone like Karen came along? Maybe you'd use fake eggs too, or maybe you've got a totally different trick. I'd love to know. Drop it in the comments below. What would you do with those plastic eggs? Would you hide them, swap them, or come up with something even wilder? You're smart, I can tell, and I bet your ideas would make me laugh just like Karen's meltdown did. Let's share some sneaky fun together. This story's been a blast, and I'm so happy you stuck with me to the end. It started with a sunny morning, some missing eggs, and a bossy lady who thought she could win. But it ended with me and my ducks safe, Karen looking silly, and a neighborhood full of laughs. Thanks for being here for every step, every quack, every sneaky swap, every big moment. You're the best, and I can't wait to tell you another story soon. What do you say? Ready for more adventures with me, Waddles, and Quackster? I'll see you in the next one. Before I go, let's think about one last thing. Karen acted big, but she was small inside. I acted small, but I had something big, my brain and my love for my ducks. That's what beat her. So next time you feel little, remember you've got something big too. Maybe it's hiding, waiting for the right moment to shine. You don't need a clipboard or a frying pan, just you, being you, is enough. What's your big thing, friends? Tell me, I want to cheer for you like the neighbors cheered for me. Thanks again, pals. This was the best, me, my ducks, and you, all together. Karen's out there somewhere, probably still mad, but we're here, smiling and winning. Let's keep that going. See you soon, okay? Quack quack from Waddles and Quackster, and a big wave from me, Sam.